Welcome to the Kennedy Report. I'm Kennedy Hall. So Archbishop Vigano blasted Pope Francis for his participation in what he called a satanic rite. We're going to talk about the theology of what actually happened when Pope Francis took part in the smudging ceremony. And he also called Justin Trudeau the Pope's altar boy, which was witty and kind of damning. And he also said they make a good couple. So if you don't know, last week Pope Francis was in Canada, and the visit was a disaster on all fronts. It was a disaster even for the optics of what the Pope was trying to accomplish. The groups who were calling for an apology for the Church's involvement in the settling of Canada and the residential school system, they were livid that the Pope did not apologize enough. Again, Pope Benedict already apologized for what had happened, and of course, there was a lot of revisionist history, and the mass grave thing was a hoax that has been proven and so forth, but that's neither here nor there. Even trying to apologize for this leftist narrative, it didn't suffice, and people were mad with the Pope. It's astonishing to read the newspapers everywhere. They're literally putting the Pope's apology in quotes as if it's not a real apology. Anyway, but while he was here, Pope Francis was also at a number of pagan or heathen ceremonies. Perhaps I should distinguish a little bit between the word pagan and heathen. Pagan also refers to sort of folk customs, whereas heathenry is more specifically devil worship. In any case, what happened was Pope Francis was at a meeting, and we've seen many videos of this.
These are unfamiliar types of things that we're not used to. Should we be concerned about this? Should we be worried? Should we what do we?
Well, if you're unfamiliar with it, it might make you a bit nervous the first time. But there are what the Holy Father Pope Francis said the other day is that we take symbols from all cultures and give them a Christological interpretation. So, if, for example, when people pray to the Great Spirit, they may not have the idea of the Trinity that we have, but we can choose to interpret it that way. So, for example, when Pope John Paul came in 1984...
Puff it around. Well, everyone's just saying that this is some sort of innocuous, harmless cultural thing. You know, it's just incense, it's just mental, it's just clarifying the mind and so forth. And granted, I'm sure there are many people who do believe that. There are many people who believe that about yoga, but ask an exorcist about what can happen there. But the theology, the actual spiritual background to what happens at a smudging ceremony, which Archbishop Vigano rightly called a satanic rite, it's much deeper than that. Now, the thing about Indigenous culture in Canada is that it's largely oral, except in the cases where the Catholic missionaries gave the Hurons and other tribes an alphabet so they could have their language, but that's neither here nor there. Apparently, Catholic priests and the Catholic Church in general has been responsible for the destruction of native culture, but the fact that they have anything written down is actually because the Catholics taught them how to read and write. But we'll square that circle another day. In any case, most of the religious things, historically, are actually just oral. And in fact, within the various traditions, because there are dozens of them, maybe hundreds, in those various traditions, it's actually frowned upon to write something down. It's sort of like, it's too sacred to put into words. We have to just pass it down. So there are these people within the various tribes, especially the Cree, for example, where they're called knowledge keepers. And essentially, they're just elders, wise men, sages, whatever, and they pass on these traditions orally and through practice with the younger generation. Well, I talked to a fella, I'm not sure if he wants to be named, but he's an expert in this subject from out west. And he has a background in understanding what happens with the various native ceremonies. So, first thing to know, the smudging ceremony is a borderline pagan sacramental ceremony. I say borderline sacramental, not borderline pagan. It is pagan. And this is why. So it is believed by those who traditionally practice the smudging ceremony that the tobacco plant, along with the other ones that are used, and tobacco is listed as the highest of the plants. To be honest, I have to agree with him on that. But with the tobacco plant, it is believed that when it is burned, that the smoke rising opens up a connection between the divine, the creator, the various demiurges, because they do believe in a lot of sort of demiurge god type things. It is believed that the prayers basically won't work unless that takes place. So, on the one hand, we understand as Catholics that we do believe that, for example, our incense that we have at Mass represents the prayers of the saints. We see this in the book of Revelation, for example. But we don't believe that there's some sort of portal that gets opened by doing this incense ceremony, and then only then can we say our prayers. That's not true at all. Plenty of Masses, there is no incense, and they're still valid. There's no problem there whatsoever. Another thing, there is a superstitious reality with the smudging ceremony where basically you're not supposed to have anything that is man-made. I don't know how they get away with using the various bowls. I think traditionally they use shells and things like that. But historically, you couldn't even wear jewelry. You couldn't use anything made of metal because that is bad and that offends the spirits. That's strange. In that ceremony with Pope Francis, they talked about opening up the circle of spirits. Essentially what this refers to, according to this expert that I spoke to, essentially what this refers to is basically ancestor worship. So you see this in Chinese traditional religion. You see this in various pagan religions all over the world, especially in Europe as well. And the idea is that basically you're invoking the spirits of those who have come before you, and they're going to be there on your behalf. You see how these things are actually, they are satanic because what they are is they're a reversal of the true faith. So if it was believed that the incensing was useful in representing lifting our hearts and minds in prayers to God, but that it in and of itself had no actual spiritual properties, that'd be totally fine. If it was believed that we ask for the intercession of those who have gone before us who are in heaven, then that's different. But if we're bringing around our ancestors as if they're types of gods, that becomes diabolical. Furthermore, this is something that I found very interesting. Historically, women who are menstruating are not allowed to take part in the indigenous ceremonies of smudging, which is so hilarious because here in Canada, the indigenous culture is exalted by the feminists, the leftists, the liberals, and so forth as the sort of poster children for the progressive, wonderful, environmentalist way of life. But that's something that's ironically extremely quote-unquote sexist. I mean, there are plenty of religions who have had ideas like that. But I find it hilarious that I'm sure these people would blast the Catholic Church for not allowing women to be priests, even though there's a deep theology behind that that has to do with Christ being a man and so forth. But in their own religion, you're not allowed to partake in the ceremony if you're menstruating. I don't understand why that is. Last thing that is concerning about what happened, the theology behind the actual pagan ceremony. There was a part with a gentleman when he was performing the ceremony in front of Pope Francis. He said, we're asking or invoking the Western grandmother. It's not really clear what that is. There are a couple possibilities. One is that he's actually referring to some sort of demiurge, like some sort of goddess. Okay, that's likely. But also, what has happened within the native religions in Canada? There's been a mixture of Catholicism. It's not much different in some ways as what has happened in various Caribbean places or in Mexico with things like Santeria, which is a syncretistic, meaning mixed religion, where it mixes parts of the true religion with pagan practices. This is where you'll have Santa Muerte, or you'll have, brujerias, where you basically have these witch doctors, is what they are. And you go into these places and you'll see like a statue of the Virgin Mary, but then you also see a voodoo doll. And it's very mixed and strange. That's a diabolical religion. Okay. So it could be that what happened is the fellow was, when he said Western grandmother, because the Pope was on a pilgrimage to St. Anne, to see the relics of St. Anne, there is an alleged apparition of St. Anne in Western Canada, and St. Anne is the grandmother of Christ. She's the mother of God. It could be that they were calling on the Western grandmother. Now, that still doesn't redeem the ceremony because it's done in a syncretistic fashion. Okay, because clearly the grandmother of Christ would not be pleased with a ceremony that invoked the circle of spirits and used this sort of superstitious portal to God in the incensing ceremony and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of questions there. Finally, Pope Francis, or Bishop Vigano, called Justin Trudeau the Pope's altar boy, which I kind of laughed when I actually read that. And he said that both of these men represent the same current. They are both children of the anti-Christic, anti-Christian, globalist elite forces. And they are marching hand in hand to basically destroy the church in Canada. He's probably correct. Pray for Pope Francis. Pray for his conversion. Pray for Justin Trudeau. He is a baptized Catholic. He is the leader of a nation. His punishment would be very severe. And pray for Bishop Vigano as well. Like this video, subscribe to this channel. Check out my books in the description if you want to protect yourself from pagan religions in your home. My book, Terror of Demons, has that, has a how-to in there to protect yourself from that. In addition, my book, Lockdown with the Devil, which is linked in the description, which is my self-published fiction with Tim Flanders at Meaning of Catholic. I'm very proud of that. It's good to read fiction. You need to read more fiction in your life, in my opinion. And I explain in there through fictitious letters how the psychology of the devil actually tempts a family. And I've heard it's been very helpful to people. So check those out. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time.